Everyone lied to you about your brain's expiration date, not metaphorically, structurally. The parts of your brain responsible for your highest order thinking, judgment, integrating patterns, strategic foresight, don't finish developing until your late 40s. That's right, not your mid 20s, your late 40s. Society tells you you've missed your window, while your brain is still installing its most sophisticated wiring. Let's start with the biggest myth, that the brain is fully developed by 25. You've heard it everywhere. It's incomplete to the point of being dangerous. What actually finishes around 25 is mostly synaptic pruning. Think of it as housekeeping, clearing out unused connections. But the real work, the insulation of the remaining connections, is a process called myelination, and that continues for decades. Research shows white matter volume, the brain's superhighways, doesn't peak until you're around 50. The trajectory is an inverted U-shape, and the peak sits squarely in your 40s and 50s. The 25-year-old brain is fast, sure, but the 45-year-old brain is connected. And it's connection, not just raw speed, that drives the kind of insight that builds empires and solves complex problems. Here's the second thing the start young crowd never mentions. Intelligence isn't one single thing. It's split into two, fluid and crystallized. Fluid intelligence is your raw processing speed, your ability to solve novel problems. It peaks in your mid-20s. That's the part everyone fixates on. But crystallized intelligence, your accumulated knowledge, your library of patterns, your contextual judgment, that keeps climbing, and it can continue to climb into your 60s and 70s. A 2025 study in translational psychiatry found these two forms of intelligence are built on entirely different neural structures. The person starting something new at 40 isn't working with a degraded brain. They're working with a brain that has spent 4 decades building the exact architecture, a thicker cortex, denser knowledge networks that crystallized intelligence thrives on. A 22-year-old learning to code has faster processing speed, but a 42-year-old has 2 decades of pattern recognition and failure data. The younger brain computes, the older brain comprehends. Finally, your brain knows it's aging, and it has a plan. It's called the scaffolding theory of aging and cognition. As some neural circuits begin to decline, the brain doesn't just give up. It recruits alternative pathways to maintain performance. It builds computational scaffolds. This isn't damage control, it's architectural innovation. Neuroimaging shows that older adults who perform well on cognitive tasks often use both hemispheres of their brain for a task that a younger adult would only use one for. The brain isn't failing, it's distributing the load across a wider, more robust network. And here's the most important part for anyone starting something late in life. This scaffolding is strengthened by new learning. Every time you acquire a novel skill after 40, you are actively participating in this upgrade. You are building the very infrastructure that will determine how well your brain adapts for the next 3 decades. So starting late doesn't mean starting behind. It means you're starting precisely when your brain's compensation architecture is most responsive, ready to build upon a lifetime of wisdom. For decades, neuroscience operated under a single stubborn dogma. Adult brains don't grow new neurons. The brain you had at 25 was the brain you were stuck with. That dogma is now dead. A landmark study in the journal Nature analyzed over 355,000 cells from human hippocampi, the brain's memory center, across the entire lifespan. What they found changes everything. They identified active neural stem cells, brand new neuroblasts, and immature neurons in adult brains. These weren't just old remnants. They were signs of active, ongoing development. The researchers also studied superagers, individuals over 80 whose memories rivaled those of people decades younger. These superagers displayed a unique neurogenesis profile the scientists called a resilience signature. Their brains weren't just preserved, they were actively generating new neurons with powerful, unique genetic networks. So, what triggers this incredible ability? It's not some magic pill, it's novel learning, environmental enrichment, cognitive challenge. It's the very act of starting something new. When you begin learning a language at 45 or pick up an instrument at 50, you're sending a direct signal to your brain to build. You are stimulating the dentate gyrus to produce new neurons that weave themselves into your memory circuits. Your brain at 40 isn't a closed system, it's a system waiting for a project. This leads to a trade-off that nobody ever explains honestly: speed versus depth. Young learners absorb surface-level information with incredible speed, but absorption isn't comprehension. The adult brain works differently. It processes new information through vast, existing knowledge networks. It anchors every new concept to decades of accumulated context. As an adult, you don't just memorize, you integrate. Cognitive psychology calls this elaborative encoding, where new information is fused with your prior knowledge. This process creates memory traces up to 3 times more durable than rote learning alone. It's why adult learners often retain information longer and understand complex systems more deeply. Think of it this way. Your ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for sound, value-based judgment, reaches its peak performance in middle age. Not because it's faster, but because it's running on 40 years of calibrated prediction models. A decision you make at 45 draws from a neural database a 25-year-old simply hasn't had time to build. Vera Wang started designing at 40. Colonel Sanders founded KFC in his 60s. Grandma Moses began painting at 78. These aren't just feel-good stories. They are the predictable outcomes of a brain that trades raw speed for profound depth. And depth is what produces mastery. Now, what about the other side of the coin, the supposed advantage of starting early? Nobody talks about this, but starting too early carries its own neurological penalty. A brain at 22 is still a work in progress. The prefrontal cortex is still pruning connections. The circuits for error detection are still being calibrated. When you build a career on a brain that hasn't finished its own construction, you're building on scaffolding that is scheduled to be dismantled over the next 2 decades. Neuroscientists call this neural overwriting. As the brain finally matures and restructures the very circuits that early success was built on, those early skills don't evolve. They often collapse. This is why so many people who succeeded early hit a profound identity crisis in their 40s. The neural architecture literally changed underneath them. The person who starts at 40 builds on finished architecture. The foundation is complete. What they build stays built. So your brain at 40 is not your brain at 25 minus 15 years of decline. It is a fundamentally different organ, optimized for integration, judgment, and strategic depth. Your myelination, the insulation that speeds up your neural signals, peaks in middle age. Your crystallized intelligence, your library of facts and skills, climbs well into your 60s, and neurogenesis, the birth of new neurons, responds to challenge at any age. You didn't miss your window just opened.